What are your thoughts on the innovations in education today? Thank you.
Just thoughts on education. I think there's maybe there are definitely some good schools out there, but I think some of the mistakes, at least in my opinion, that I see being made in education is that the teachers do not explain why kids are being taught a subject. Just sort of get dumped into math and like, well, why are you learning math? What's the point of this? This seems like some, for some people, like maybe it's, I don't know why I'm being asked to do these strange problems. But the why of things is extremely important, because our brain has evolved to discard information that it thinks has no relevance. So then, if on the one hand you're being asked to memorize or learn, say, formulas, but you do not know why this is the case, then you have this cognitive dissonance of, it seems irrelevant, but I'm being told to remember it, so I'll be punished. so I better remember it. So the why of things is very important, and then being able to, and then picking kind of a problem, and then using various educational tools to solve that problem, like using math or physics or economics to solve that problem, is far more engaging than teaching the tools. It's the difference between if you say, well, we're going to take apart this engine and see how it works and put it back together again. And then in order to take the engine apart, we need wrenches and screwdrivers and a winch and Allen keys and whatnot. And then in the course of solving the problem of taking the engine apart and putting it back together, you learn about wrenches and screwdrivers and all the tools that you need. And then now you understand the relevance. This is why wrenches are important. Whereas if you had a class on wrenches, you'd be like, why does this not seem that great? So tying it to solving a problem is, I think, very powerful for establishing relevance and getting kids excited about what they're working on, and having the knowledge stick.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men all my life. Like na 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 na. For my top 10, top 10, na 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 na. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Elon Musk, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, try hard enough.
If you're going to try something innovative, then you're in unexplored territories, so the odds that something will go wrong are pretty high. It's only if you try to do something that is already well understood that there's little chance of failure, but then it will not be interesting or innovative. For sure, uncharted territory will result in failures necessarily. Otherwise, you're not trying hard enough.
Rule number 3, make a way.
SpaceX, you have said you started with the specific intention of getting to Mars.
Well, the origin of SpaceX was actually not, my interest in space, my initial thought in space was that it wasn't possible to create a company, and I mistakenly thought that the reason that we'd not sent people to Mars was because we'd lost the will to explore or something, or like maybe that, and I thought, well, maybe that needs to be reignited, and so I came up with this idea to do basically a philanthropic mission to Mars with a 100% probability of losing all the money, in order to reignite interest in that goal. But after a while, I realized that was a mistake. I mean, particularly the United States is a nation of explorers, came here from other parts of the world. I think more than any other country is a distillation of the human spirit of exploration. There's no lack of will. But people need to believe that there's a way, that a way that's feasible and that it's not going to bankrupt the country and their living standard won't be materially affected. And then I think they're super keen on that goal.
Rule number 4, be inspired.
I think like sci-fi movies, video games, or video, and really I think people spend a lot more time on video games and movies these days. Can be pretty inspiring and thought-provoking about what's the future that we want. What are some like impossible-sounding technologies that maybe could work somehow? Like there's conceivably a way to do warp drive, but it's such esoteric, super out on the edge physics, because technically you cannot go faster than the speed of light, but space can travel faster than the speed of light. That's what's meant by warp drive. But the amount of energy you need to warp space is unbelievably gigantic. So, you'd have to be converting matter to energy at a rate that is cannot conceive, really. It can't be like something like, well, if we just convert 1 Jupiter per second to energy, then problem solved. That's a lot, and there's not many Jupiters. So, and there might be a bit of radiation around that. So, there are things like technically the universe did expand faster than the speed of light. That's why we can see light from all these super distant stars. So it's kind of pretty wild that space expanded faster than the speed of light. So I'm sure we'll figure out some strange breakthroughs and come to grips better with this dark matter, especially, which seems like something's fishy going on there. And
it has bad branding.
Yeah, exactly. The universe is mostly dark energy and dark matter according to current physics, but this kind of plug them in the equations and they sort of work. And this is not a good explanation. Nobody can find the dark matter. But I sort of figure, hey, if this was a video game and somebody had a bug in their orbital dynamics physics simulator, then it's oh no, we got to figure out some way for these minions in here to believe that they're in reality. So insert dark matter.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, the science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action for you to build a habit. So I've created a special free program to help you where every day for 254 days, I will send you an email that has a link to an unlisted video that if you watch it will boost your confidence forward. The link to join for free is in the description below.
There are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough that you do it in spite of the fear. If you have a great product, lots of people will buy it. And then the company will be successful. That ended up being worse than if we had designed a car from the beginning.
Rule number 5, let go of fear.
What problems out there can feasibly be fixed, say, in our lifetimes?
Well, I think first of all, the world's actually pretty great right now. Arguably better than any point in history. And this is sometimes lost if you read the newspapers. They're like a magnification of all the world's problems. It's newspapers seem to be attempting to answer the question, what was the worst thing that happened on Earth today? And it's...
You're right. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, and it's okay. And I think there is kind of an evolutionary reason for that, because it makes more sense to, you want to prioritize danger over reward, or risk, because if you get eaten by the lion, it's game over. But if you forget where you left some snack, that's okay. So there's it's not quite the same in terms of the risk-reward balance, but we didn't evolve with newspapers and global media. So our brain's sort of having a fear response to a bunch of dangers that are extremely unlikely to ever affect us.
Rule number 6, embrace competition.
I think it's fine if countries get together to form teams, but I think it's actually probably better if there are at least 2 or 3 country coalitions going to Mars in a friendly way, and competing to see who can make the most progress. And if you look at, like, say, the Olympics, it would be pretty boring if everyone just linked arms and crossed the finishing line at the same time. Friendly, but it would, not be
more like the opening ceremonies, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I think friendly competition is a good thing.
Yeah.
Rule number 7, question your constraints.
Question your constraints. It does not matter if the person handing you those constraints won a Nobel Prize. Even Einstein was wrong some of the time.
Right.
So question your constraints. This is extremely important. And I think another thing that, like, you say, like, what are the mistakes that smart engineers make? One of the biggest traps for smart engineers is optimizing a thing that shouldn't exist.
Yeah. So they'll just sit there and spin on that thing that's just like, why do we even have this in the first place?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So because when you go through college, like studying physics and engineering, I studied physics. You have to answer the question that the professor gives you. Mm-hmm. You don't get to say this is the wrong question.
Right. Yeah.
But in reality, we have far more degrees. When you're in reality, you have all the degrees of freedom of reality. And so the first thing you should say is this question is wrong.
Yeah. And that's what you said last year.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of said, like, it took us a long time to frame the question even. Because
Yes.
we didn't necessarily know
It took
what it
ages
was.
to frame the question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams, best philosopher ever. Maybe, I think, best book in philosophy ever, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This book is so deep, people don't understand. But like in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Earth is a giant computer.
Right.
And the Earth, it comes up with the answer 42.
Okay. Yep.
And to the question, like, so what's the answer to life, the universe, and everything? Answer is 42. And like, they're like, what the hell? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It's like, the hard part is the question. The answer is the easy part. You need a much more powerful computer to tell you what the question is.
Right.
And this is true. At the point at which you can properly frame the question, the answer is comparatively easy.
Rule number 8, solve environmental sustainability.
I think humans will solve environmental sustainability. I do not mean to suggest complacency or that we just take it easy. In fact, this is a self-fulfilling or unfulfilling prophecy. We must take immediate and dramatic action, and and continue the momentum towards environmental sustainability. And China is actually the world leader in this. In fact, I'm not sure how well it is known outside of China, just how much China is a world leader in environmental sustainability. It's extremely impressive. I mean, I think half of all the electric cars in the world were made in China last year, something like that. So, I don't mean to suggest complacency, but I do think humans can and will solve sustainability.
Rule number 9, execute well.
How much time do you have to go down into the engine room, roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, and fix stuff as an engineer? And how much time do you spend on the bridge, steering and looking at the distant horizon?
Well, not a lot on that last point. There's a constant flurry of executional challenges, and so I try to triage my time according to what would be best for the companies, and still, have some time to see my kids, because I don't want to miss them growing up. So, it can vary from big issues to things that seem small but actually could have a really big impact. It's all the way from design aesthetics to the details of, say, the vehicle functionality, or in the case of the rocket, the avionics propulsion system and airframe. The rocket is kind of has more of a concentrated pucker factor, because you got these launches, and at least with a car you can do a recall or like do a software update. That's not going to happen with the rocket. So it's like passing grade is 100%, which induces anxiety.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is have fun.
So the camera, with the camera, and then somebody else with a camera.
It's just camera envy at this point. He's just trying to, he saw me with this and he's like, listen.
I'll get my camera out.
Yeah, you take a video of me.
I can take a video of this, of you guys taking
then
a video.
Then you get over, make sure this is going through there. Okay. Just shoot the screen the whole time. Okay. I don't want anything else.
All right, so this is, okay, so I'm being videoed here, and then the video of the video. And this is the video of the video of the video.
Go back there. Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you watch a video and just get motivated, you have a 35% chance of actually following through. That's what the science says. And that is not good enough, Believe Nation. We need to do better. When you actually get motivated and then create a specific plan of action for what you're going to do this week, you have a 91% chance of following through. And when you publicly commit to somebody else, like leaving a comment below in this video, it jumps even higher. So I want that for you. I want to know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week so I can celebrate with you.
Probably wouldn't have started programming if it wasn't for video games, or wouldn't have been as interested in computers and technology if it wasn't for video games. So I think actually video games are a very powerful force for getting young kids interested in technology. It has way bigger knock-on effects than people may realize. And generally, like if we're interviewing somebody for a software engineering role at Tesla or SpaceX, many times they'll be like, how'd you start programming? It's like, oh, got into video games. Over and over again. And I think many of the best software engineers in the world are at or spent much of their career at video games houses. And especially if people had to try to create incredibly realistic graphics using very little compute power, that's a hard problem. And so a lot of people had to write really tight code and come up with really clever ideas to do that. And if you look at someone like, say, John Carmichael, who's an amazing software engineer, but is also actually a really good aerospace engineer. Mm-hmm. And it shows, like, problem solving, I think, does transfer. Like, you figure out software engineering problem solving and transfers to other things.
My view on AI is essentially you can view the advancement of AI as solving things with increasing degrees of freedom. So the thing with the most degrees of freedom is reality. But AI has steadily advanced, solving things that have more and more degrees of freedom. So obviously something like checkers was very easy to solve. That we could solve with classical software, classical computing, not really all that challenging. And in fact, there is a complete solution for checkers, meaning it is literally impossible. Every version of checkers is known. And then there's chess, which also it had many more degrees of freedom than checkers, many orders of magnitude more than checkers, but still really, I would say, a low order of magnitude, low degree of freedom game. Then there's Go, which had many orders of magnitude more degrees of freedom than chess. So it's really just stepping through orders of magnitude of degrees of freedom. This is the way to, I think, view the advancement of intelligence.
You're CEO of 2 companies, you're chairman of Solar City. Talk about time management. How on earth do you do this?
Well,
do you get any sleep?
Yeah, sometimes not enough. Sleep is really great, because I find if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm quite grumpy. I mean, obviously, I think most people are that way. And also, like I try to sort of figure out what's the right amount of sleep, because I found I could drop below a certain threshold of sleep, and although I'd be awake more hours and I could sustain it, I would get less done because my mental acuity would be affected. So I found generally the right number for me is around 6 to 6.5 hours on average per night.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
Right. And any other tips
That is
on
an average, though.
right? Any other tips on just managing to run two companies simultaneously? I mean, do you find? I mean, I know you're up here Monday, Tuesday. Is it all Tesla when you're up in Silicon Valley, and all SpaceX Wednesday, Thursday?
Having a having a smartphone is incredibly helpful, because that means you can do email during interstitial periods. Like if you're in a car, you're walking, in the bathroom, everywhere. You can do email practically when you're awake, and so that's really helpful to have email for SpaceX and Tesla integrated on my phone, and then it's just you have to apply a lot of hours to actually working. So the way I generally do it is I'll be working at SpaceX on Monday, and then Monday night flight to the Bay Area, spend Tuesday and Wednesday in the Bay Area, then at Tesla, and then fly back on Wednesday night, spend Thursday and Friday at SpaceX. In the last several months, then I would fly back here on a Saturday, and either spend Saturday and Sunday at Tesla, or spend Saturday at Tesla and Sunday at SpaceX.
What motivations do people need to harness to try to make change, as opposed to just reading about change? And that's not supposed to be an easy question. I don't think, oh, it's this.
Well, like I said, I think if you study engineering and you figure out how to design new things, then it's relatively easy to start a company. You just need to get a few like-minded people with you, and then focus on creating a prototype, a compelling prototype, as soon as possible. And then, there's a strong venture capital industry in this country that will give you funding to take things to the next level, and that's all there is to it. And you might, if you try it a few times, you may or may not succeed. But I think sometimes people fear starting a company too much. You have to say, really, what's the worst that could go wrong? You're not going to starve to death. You're not going to die of exposure. What's the worst that could go wrong? Or maybe I just blank out the word doubt. No, I mean, to be totally frank, I doubted us too. So I thought we, had maybe, when starting SpaceX, maybe had a 10% chance of reaching orbit. So to those who doubted us, I was like, well, I think you're probably right. I mean, the number of times that I was told, like, because I was taking the money that I earned from PayPal and rolling it into to create SpaceX and Tesla, and I ended up spending it all. It wasn't the intention, but almost both companies went bankrupt. Frankly, 2008 was a tough year. It took us 4 attempts just to get to orbit with Falcon 1. But a lot of times people would tell me this joke, like, how do you make a small fortune in the rocket industry? You start with a large one, is the punchline. And I was like, okay, I already heard that joke 12,000 times, Anyway, and it almost came true. We just barely made it there, that 4th launch of Falcon 1. That's all the money we had for that 4th launch. And then, and that wasn't even enough to save the company. We also then had to win the NASA cargo resupply contract. So that came a little after, a little bit later, or right towards the end of 2008. Those are the two key things that saved SpaceX. Otherwise, we would have, not made it. So yeah, I think those doubters their probability assessment was correct. But fortunately, fate has smiled upon us and brought us to this day.
In the beginning, nobody wanted a Tesla, I can tell you that. When we made the original sort of roadster sports car, people were like, well, why would I want an electric car? My gasoline car works fine. I'm like, no, electric car is better, I should try it. And it was hard to get people to do a test drive. First of all, nobody knew who we were. I'd never heard of this company. And I'm like, yeah, we're named after Nikola Tesla. You know that guy? Nope. So for sure we were doing push in the beginning because people said there was no one telling us that they wanted an electric car. So it was not out of like, it was like lots of people coming up to me saying, hey, I really want an electric car. I heard that 0 times. So people were like, it's like, man, we better make an electric car and show that these things can be good, and then people will want them. It's like, I think it was like Henry Ford said, like if we're talking about the Model T, it's like if you asked the public what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. Mm-hmm. So if you did like a big survey and said, well, hey, public, before automobiles, what would you like? It's like, well, I'd like my horse to go 3 miles an hour faster and eat less food and, be stronger and live longer and that kind of thing. There'll all be basically a bunch of incremental improvements on a horse. Because people, when you say like, well, what about an automobile, that car that drives itself? Like, what are you talking about? That sounds crazy. But when you actually make an automobile and give it to people and say, okay, now this is a horse where you can keep it in the barn, and if you leave for a month, it's still alive. Yeah. So carry more weight than a horse and go further and that kind of thing. So it's like when it's a radically new product, people don't know that they want it because it's just not in their scope. I think when they first started making TVs, they did a nationwide survey. I think this might have been like 46 or 48. It was like a famous nationwide survey. Will you ever buy a TV? And it was like 96% of respondents said no. Some crazy number. Like basically everyone's like, would you buy a TV? And maybe they put a price in there or something, I don't know. But it was famously, almost everyone said they would not buy a TV, but they didn't know what they were talking about.
So the big game-changing stuff at the beginning is a company push kind of a thing most of the time, but then changes to the product over time can be a lot more customer pull kind of a focus.
Yeah, changes to the product over time can be incremental changes. Then customers can certainly tell you, it's good to get customer feedback to say, how can we improve the product? And once they're using it, they can say, okay, I like this thing about it, I don't like this other thing, and then we can improve the product over time. Customer feedback after they have the fundamental thing is great.
How much of your success do you attribute to having really audacious goals, or versus just not being focused on the short term, money coming in, or I don't know, investors?
Unfortunately, one does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company. The most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it. And have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
Young people globally who want to be like Elon Musk. What's your advice to them?
I think that probably they shouldn't want to be.
You?
I think it sounds better than it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as much fun being me as you'd think. I don't know.
You don't think so?
No. There's definitely, it could be worse for sure, but it's, I'm not sure I'm not sure I want to be me.
Okay.
But if, I think advice, I mean, if you want to make progress in things, I think that the best analytical framework for understanding the future is physics. I'd recommend studying the thinking process around physics, like not the equations. I mean, the equations certainly they're helpful, but the way of thinking in physics is it's the best framework for understanding things that are counterintuitive. And always taking the position that you are to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong over time. I think one of the biggest mistakes people generally make, and I'm guilty of it too, is wishful thinking. Like you want something to be true, even if it isn't true. And so you ignore the things that, you ignore the real truth because of what you want to be true. This is a very difficult trap to avoid. And like I said, it's certainly one that I find myself in having problems with. But if you just take that approach of you're always to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong, and solicit critical feedback, particularly from friends. Like friends, particularly friends, if somebody loves you, they want the best for you. They don't want to tell you the bad things. So you have to ask them, and say, really, I really do want to know. and then they'll tell you.
The most important mistake I see smart people making is assuming that they're smart. They're not.
Yeah. So give me an example, what the animals or things that a human being made that is smarter than human beings?
Well, computers actually are already much smarter than people on so many dimensions. We just keep moving the goalposts. So we used to think, like, for example, being good at chess was an example of a smart human. And then Kasparov was crushed by Deep Blue in '97. That was a long time ago. 22 years. I mean, right now your cell phone could crush the world champion at chess, literally. Go used to be thought of as something that humans were better at than computers. Then Lee Sedol was beaten 4-1 by AlphaZero. Then a new version of AlphaZero, I should say AlphaGo. AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol 4-1. Then there's AlphaZero. AlphaZero crushed AlphaGo 100-0. Now it's just pointless because it just keeps playing itself. Humans are trying to play a computer Go is like trying to fight Zeus. It's not going to work. Hopeless. We're hopelessly inadequate. In terms of rendering, basically, there's just a smaller and smaller corner of intellectual pursuits that humans are better than computers, and that every year it gets smaller and smaller, and soon we will be far, far surpassed in every single way, guaranteed. 100%. Or civilization will end. Those are the two possibilities.
I think it's also important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. So the normal way that we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. We're doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it's like what other people are doing.
Me Too type ideas.
Yeah, slight iterations on a theme, and it's kind of mentally easier to reason by analogy rather than from first principles. But by first principles is kind of a physics way of looking at the world, and what that really means is you kind of boil things down to the most fundamental truths, and say, okay, what are we sure is true, or as sure as possible is true, and then reason up from there. That takes a lot more mental energy.
Give me an example of that. Like, what's one thing that you've done that on that you feel has worked for you?
Sure. So somebody could say, in fact, people do, that battery packs are really expensive, and that's just the way they'll always be, because that's the way they've been in the past. You're like, well, no, that's pretty dumb, because if you applied that reasoning to anything new, then you wouldn't be able to ever get to that new thing.
Right.
2008 in particular was awful because we had the third launch failure in a row of our Falcon 1 vehicle at SpaceX, and the Tesla financing round that we were raising fell apart because the economy was going to tailspin, and it's pretty hard to raise money for a startup car company. Late 2008 when GM and Chrysler are busy going bankrupt. That was tough. And then Solar City had a deal with Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley had to renege on the deal because they themselves were running out of money. So it looked like all three companies were going to die, and I was also going through a divorce. So that was definitely a low point.
So it's 2008. You're going through a divorce, which, like some, to borrow your word, douchebag bloggers are writing about to make even worse.
Right. Yes, that's true. In addition to all that stuff happening, I was getting dumped on massively in the press.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like all three companies are going to fail. I mean, why do you keep going with all three? Like, I feel like even a lot of great entrepreneurs in that situation would have been like, I've already sunk everything I have in these companies, and I got to pick one. But you didn't. I mean, you kept doing all three. Why?
That was a very tough call. At the end of 2008, that was probably one of the toughest calls I've had to make, because I could either reserve capital for one company or the other. I mean, fortunately, Solar City didn't need a ton of capital, so they were okay. But between SpaceX and Tesla, it's sort of like if you've got two kids, and what do? Do you spend all your money to maximize the probability of success of one, or do you try to keep both alive? Fortunately, it worked.
I remember when you first told me that you were thinking about tunnels.
When did I first tell you about that?
Years ago.
Okay, it's like a long time ago.
Yeah,
like,
I thought you were joking.
Yeah, it was. I was joking, but it's not because of some epiphany that I had one day driving down the 405. That's how it gets translated somehow. I was talking about tunnels for years and years. For probably 5 years or 4 years at least, whenever I'd give a talk and people would ask me about what opportunities do you see in the world, I'd say tunnels. Can someone please build tunnels? So after 4 or 5 years of begging people to build tunnels, and still no tunnels, I was like, okay, I want to build a tunnel. So like maybe I'm missing something here. So I was like basically talking people's ears off for tunnels for several years, and then said, well, let's find out what it takes to build a tunnel. And so I started digging a tunnel. I wanted to start the tunnel from where I could see it from my office at SpaceX. So I said, well, let's just carve off a part of the parking lot across the road so I can see if anything's happening or not. And then we named our first boring machine Godot, because I kept waiting for it. It never came. Finally it did. And we got it going. And now we're making good progress.
When you were in college and developing these skills, you wanted to do some things that were of benefit to humanity. Why did you think that?
Well,
because not everyone does.
Yeah, no, I guess it was, I had sort of an existential crisis of like, what does it all mean, and what's the meaning of life, and
was this 3 a.m. over a beer, or this was more serious?
It probably goes back to high school, I guess. I don't want to give a laboriously long answer, but I was, I had sort of a dark childhood. It wasn't good. Probably partially brought on by reading some of the philosophers. Like, don't ever read Schopenhauer and Nietzsche if you're 14.
it's not good.
Yeah, or Ayn Rand either. Too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just trying to figure out what does it all mean, and actually, when I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I think is a great work of philosophy, that sort of highlighted the point that very often the issue is understanding what questions to ask, and if you can properly frame the question, then the answer is the easy part. So I thought things that expand the scope and scale of the human consciousness and allow us to better ask questions and achieve greater enlightenment, those are good things. And so that's sort of what can we do that's going to most likely lead to that outcome.
I had a lot of friends of mine try to talk me out of starting a rocket company because they thought it was crazy, and one friend of mine made me watch a video of rockets blowing up. And there were just lots of people that thought it was a really crazy idea, and there was some people that had tried to start rocket companies, not succeeded, and they tried to talk me out of it. And but the thing is that the premise for talking me out of it was, well, we think you're going to lose the money that you invest. I was like, well, that was my expectation anyway, so I don't really mind if I lose. I mean, I might, but I mean, it's not like I was trying to figure out the rank-ordered best way to invest money, and on that basis, chose space. Right. It's not like that's. I thought, wow.
You weren't looking at like money market bonds, AAA bonds,
exactly.
rocket company.
Like,
you weren't like
do real estate. Invest in shoemaking, anything. And whoa, space is highest ROI. That is not what that wasn't the premise. I just thought that it was important that humanity expand beyond Earth, and we weren't doing that. So maybe there was something I could do to kind of spur that on.
When did it occur to you that Zip2 might be a success?
Well, I mean, when we first started out, I think our ambitions were really quite low. It was really to make enough money to pay the rent.
Yeah, we got a VC give us money. That was,
yay!
Yeah. We thought it was all over then.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, when we started out in '95, we literally, at the beginning, we had one computer, which would be the web server during the day, and then at night, I'd program on it. And
we'd sleep in the office.
Yeah,
we couldn't afford to have an apartment.
It was cheaper to rent the office than to rent an apartment, so we just rented the office and slept in the office and showered at the YMCA.
Showered at the YMCA. And for me, the worst part was eating at Jack in the Box 3 times a week.
Yeah, man, this is like,
I'll sleep
it's really difficult to get food at Palo Alto after like 10 p.m. It's like Jack in the Box and a few other options. So we rotated through the Jack in the Box menu. Through the end of '95, that's essentially we're just sleeping in the office and showering at the YMCA, and then around the end of '95 is when Netscape went public, and then whether or not somebody knew what the internet was, they knew that you could make money on the internet somehow, or even if it's only on the greater fool theory. So when we went and talked to venture capitalists in early '96, there was a much greater interest in what we were doing. In fact, the round closed in like maybe a week or something.
It was crazy. Yeah, we went from sleeping in the office to people throwing, I mean, again, this is a financial crowd, so you guys see these numbers every day, but for us to hear, we'll give you $3 million.
Yeah, it sounded extremely, we thought they were crazy. Like, why would they do that?
It was literally like, these people are insane.
They obviously did not realize we're sleeping in the office.
In fact, when they did fund us, they realized that we were illegal immigrants.
Well,
yes, we were.
I'd say it was a gray area.
Yeah, yes, we were. We were illegal immigrants. We were sleeping in the office. We didn't have a car. We had one car, but the wheel kept falling off.
Well, actually, yeah, the wheel did actually fall off the car.
Yes, exactly. And the venture capitalists actually bought us cars.
Yeah, well, they gave us 40 grand.
It was 40 grand to go buy cars, which was, at the time, was more money than we've ever seen.
If you think like, what is education? Like, you're basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain. And it's actually amazingly bad in conventional education, because like, it shouldn't be like this huge chore. So you're making it way better. But I mean, I think a lot of the things that I would say you've probably heard 100 times, and in fact are, if not doing, like, the more you can gamify the process of learning, the better. Like, for my kids, I do not have to encourage them to play video games. Okay, I have to like pry them from their hands, like crack.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's like drop that crack needle.
Yeah, yeah. You have that problem at your house too.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
The crack is addictive.
So it's it's to the degree that you can make somehow learning like a game, that then it's better. And I think, unfortunately, like a lot of education is very vaudevillian. You've got someone standing up there kind of lecturing at people, and they've done the same lecture 20 years in a row, and they're not very excited about it. And that lack of enthusiasm, is conveyed to the students. They're not very excited about it. They don't know why they're there. Like, why are we learning this stuff? We don't even know why. In fact, I think a lot of things people learn, probably there's no point in learning them. Because they never use them in the future.
Because who's going to launch a rocket into space? I mean, that's just like, yeah, exactly. That never happens.
Well, you have to say, like, people, I think, don't stand back and say, well, why are we teaching people these things? And we should tell them probably why we're teaching these things. Because a lot of kids just in school kind of puzzled as to why they're there. And I think if you can explain the why of things, then that makes a huge difference to people's motivation. Then they understand purpose.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty important.
The real way I think you actually achieve intellectual property protection is by innovating fast enough. If your rate of innovation is high, then you don't need to worry about protecting the IP because other companies will be copying something that you did years ago. And that's fine, just make sure your rate of innovation is fast. Speed of innovation is what matters. And I do say this to my teams like quite a lot, that innovation per unit time, as I go innovation per year, if you want to say it, like is what matters, not innovation absent time. Because if you wanted to make, say, 100% improvement in something, and that took 100 years or 1 year, that's radically different. So it's like, what is your rate of innovation? That matters. And is the rate of innovation, is that accelerating or decelerating? And a weird thing happens when companies get big is that most companies or organizations, the bigger they get, they tend to get less innovative. Not just less innovative on a per person basis, but less innovative in the absolute. And I think this is probably because the incentive structure is not there for innovation. It's not enough to use words to encourage innovation. The incentive structure must be aligned with that. That's fundamental.
One does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You've got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
So how do you keep your focus on the big picture when you're constantly faced with, we could be out of business in a month?
Well, it's just a very small percentage of mental energy is on the big picture. Like you know where you're generally heading for, and the actual path is going to be some sort of zigzaggy thing in that direction. And try not to deviate too far from the path that you want to be on, but you're going to have to do that to some degree. But I don't want to diminish the. I mean, I think the profit motive is a good one if the rules of an industry are properly set up. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with profit. In fact, profit just means that people are paying you more for whatever you're doing than you're spending to create it. That's a good thing. and if that's not the case, then you'll be out of business, and rightfully so. Because you're not adding enough value. I think that the way that we currently do education is wrong, and when you see something like the Khan Academy and so forth, I think that's probably going in the right direction. I mean, generally you want education to be like as close to a video game as possible, like a good video game. Like, you do not need to tell your kid to play video games. They will play video games on autopilot all day. So if you can make it interactive and engaging, then you can make education far more compelling and far easier to do. So I think that's how it should be. And it shouldn't be that you've got like these grades where people move in lockstep. And so everyone goes through, goes like normally, we'll go through English, math, science and so forth from like 5th grade to 6th grade to 7th grade, like it's an assembly line. But people are not objects on an assembly line. That's a ridiculous notion. People learn and are interested in different things at different paces. So you really want to disconnect the whole grade level thing from the subjects. Allow people to progress at the fastest pace that they can or are interested in each subject. Well, I think part of the problem, the reason people aren't as excited about space is that we haven't been pushing the frontier as much. And so you can only watch the same movie so many times before it gets a little boring. And in the 60s and early 70s, we were really pushing the frontier of human spaceflight. And obviously those landing on the moon is regarded as one of the greatest achievements of humanity, arguably of life itself. And even though only a handful of people went to the moon, vicariously we all went there. Well, at least I wasn't alive at the time, but retrospectively. And it was just one of those really inspiring things that I think made everyone glad to be human. It's like the things that they're bad things humanity does, and they're good things, and this is one of the good things. And I do think it's important that we have these inspiring things that make you glad to get up in the morning and glad to be a member of the human race. And we need to push that frontier. And I think the great goal we should be trying to pursue is trying to make life make life multiplanetary. Mm-hmm. So to establish a self-sustaining and growing civilization on another planet, Mars being the only realistic possibility, and I think that would just be one of the greatest things humanity could ever try to do.
We're focused on, like I said, it is important to have the objective be right. That's why I was talking so much about the importance of making Mars building a self-sustaining city on Mars. If that's the objective, then obviously, just putting some satellites in orbit that's not important. You have to achieve full and rapid reusability. I emphasize full and rapid. Reusability is only relevant to the degree it's rapid and complete. And then you also have to do orbital refilling. This is essential as well. And then propellant production on Mars, also essential. So, with that as the goal, then that means that creates, I think, a good forcing function for radical innovation, because in the absence of radical innovation, we have no chance of meeting that goal. Whereas if our goal is simply, defeat Lockheed and Boeing or something like that, we would probably achieve. You've already done it. That really wasn't even a thing, Yeah. I wish it was. They're not really not even trying to do reusability, which is bizarre because they make planes that are reusable. So, I mean, if they talk to if they talk to one of their customers who buys a Lockheed fighter jet or a Boeing aircraft, like, hey, we're going to sell you a 737. It can be used once, and it's not a 737 Max. But that turns out that was a single-use airplane at times. But it really. It would be an absurd thing for them to sell a single-use aircraft, but they feel quite comfortable selling a single-use rocket. And anyway, but if our goal was simply we're going to be the leaders in launching the conventional satellites that exist, we would probably approach that on a sort of a logarithmic basis, where you'd get there and you'd sort of slowly make progress towards doing 10 launches a year, 12 launches a year, and while they do 6 or something like that. I don't know. But since the goal is, hey, we need to make life multiplanetary before it's too late, and time really matters. So it's like we're shooting for Mars, not just the moon. It's not let's shoot for the moon, shoot for Mars. And then these competitive things are kind of small things along the way. Unless somebody else is shooting for Mars, they will not be competitive with something as pedestrian as launching a few satellites into Earth orbit.
I think just generally the path to leadership should not be through, basically MBA business school situation. It's like it should be kind of work your way up, do useful things, and and there's a bit too much of somebody goes to a high-profile MBA school and then kind of parachutes in as the leader, but they don't actually know how things work. They can be good at, say, PowerPoint presentations or something like that, and they can present well, but they don't actually know how things work because they do not, they parachute in instead of like working their way up.
They never went through an apprenticeship, for lack of a better word.
They're kind of like just not aware of what's really needed for to make great products. So, I mean, I don't want to trash MBAs too much here, and I actually do have a dual undergrad, Wharton undergrad, and physics at UPenn. So. So I have I have direct exposure to business school, and I went to do undergrad business school with physics. But and I was a teaching assistant for 2 semesters, and I graded MBAs and undergrads. But I think it's just a little bit too much. Like people look at MBA school as like I want to parachute into being the boss instead of earning it, and I don't think that's good.
If you want 10 more amazing rules from Elon Musk, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
The whole reason I started SpaceX was actually to try to increase NASA's budget. Or at least the way I got interested in space was I was trying to figure out why we had not gone to Mars. And then I thought, well,